All right. Well, let's get started here. Thanks for everyone coming, and the early birds, thank you for getting on a couple minutes early here. We appreciate that, and we'll try to keep this to our time limit. My name is Chris Lee again, and I am the founder of ChannelBytes, and we have some guests today from Synercomm. Lisa and Jeff, super excited to get this conversation off the ground. Everyone's on mute. If you have questions, please use the ask questions via the GoToMeeting app, and we'll get to those as we get through the presentation. This is meant to be more interactive than just PowerPoint slides to death. So with that, first, Jeff and Lisa, thanks for coming on today. Hopefully you guys can see the slides and our videos. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourselves?
Sure, thanks, Chris. I'll go first. My name is Jeff Lemmermann. I'm born and raised Wisconsinite and a proud Green Bay Packer shareholder. I've been in IT since the days of the Commodore 64 when a couple of friends of mine, we would play Nerf basketball, and we actually built an electronic scoreboard on a Commodore 64 using the old BASIC cartridge. So that was my introduction to the home IT support. My wife reminds me of how much of a geek I really am. And I can't argue with her. I'm also a CPA, so I'm a numbers geek and a computer geek kind of combined. And my geekiness goes back 25 years in the IT realm and about 29 years as a CPA. So again, I can't argue with her. My nerdiness comes out in many ways. I have a son who loves sports, which is good because he has a dad who loves sports. I still play baseball. I coach his baseball team, and I coach high school basketball in the winters to get me through the Wisconsin snow, since I'm not much of a skier. And with no live sports to watch nowadays, my wife and I have gone to finding live concerts by musicians and bands that we love. So fortunately, a lot of bands are doing that now and coming out with new content. So that's how we're helping pass the stuck-at-home time. Lisa?
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, everybody, and thanks again for attending. I'm Lisa Niles. I am a Chief Solution Architect at Synercomm. I've been at Synercomm for just about 25 years, and have been in this industry for over 30. Kind of makes me older than dirt, but I've never seen anything like what we're experiencing right now, and that's part of the reason why we're having this webinar today, just to kind of go through some of those tips. I am a true Wisconsin girl, love beer, cheese, and Harley Davidsons. And I'll apologize ahead of time. I've got a German Shepherd here at home, and if he barks, his name is Harley. So that's all about me. And thanks again.
All right, thanks. Well, so you guys have been in the industry for a while. It seems like Synercomm's been in the industry even longer. You've probably seen some crazy things over the years, but obviously nothing that we're encountering right now. So what are some of the crazy things you're seeing right now? I mean, my guess is a lot of the bad guys out there are taking advantage of this new normal. What are some things that we all should be taking into consideration?
Sure. One of the biggest things that we're seeing is the exploitation of the help desk, right? So companies, they've got help desk personnel, and right now they're being swamped. They're being swamped with new home users who don't know how to do certain things, and so they're calling in a lot of their own help problems, and the bad guys are taking advantage. They're making the calls. They're purporting to be some of these helpless users, trying to convince the help desk people to change passwords or grant additional access that they probably shouldn't have. So we're really recommending to companies not just to train the users, right? Because there's been a lot of talk about making sure end users. Companies really brushed up on what the authentication process is over the phone. How do you really tell that somebody that's calling in, that's who they are, and then this is the person that I should be helping, or telling them how to log in and change their password and grant the additional access that they need now remotely that they had when they were in the office. So really make sure your help desk personnel are aware of these new threats and that they're trained as well as the end users. This is another good one. Just think about yourself. How many old thumb drives did you collect from conferences and different places you went? Free ones that were handed out, and they're laying around the house. are users using those thumb drives to transfer information from their work laptop to their home computer because, they've got one printer at home and they don't have the slightest idea how to get that printer hooked up to their company laptop. So, are they transferring information on these old USB drives? Then after they transfer the information, think about the company files. You've got a spreadsheet somebody might want to work on. It's got personal identifiable information or credit card information or, even company confidential information. Now that stuff is on a thumb drive that, they use to copy to the home computer. It's also on the home computer. It's a lot of risks, a lot of exposure now of data that you had under control before they were a remote user, and now that they're a remote user, it's expanded exponentially with where they can put the data and how it can move around. So, as a company, do you have a data loss prevention solution that keeps people from copying to USB drives when they're at home? A lot of times in the office it was easy to lock down, but at home, is that so easy now that you've got this new influx of remote users and what they're going to do with data and move it around? That exposes and increases the risk to companies significantly. Wi-Fi use. So I do personally know a few friends who, in their means to budget and save money, they live in apartments or condos that they can see free Wi-Fi hotspots, either their neighbors, coffee shop, restaurants, and so that's how they save money. Is they don't pay for Wi-Fi, they get it for free, and usually it's the wide open kind, the unsecure spots that don't require a password. Well, now think that those people are remote workers, and so they're doing company business over wide open free Wi-Fi. Again, you're exposing data to a lot of different risks than when you were in the confines of your own building. So that's another concern that I see, and that we try to tell our companies, our customers, hey, if you're granting remote access, let's train those users on what Wi-Fi spots they should use and shouldn't use, and when they're at home, setting up their own Wi-Fi spots to be secure. I got one more, if I got the time, subdomain takeover. So, our companies, when we talk about perimeter security and extending remote access, everybody focuses on the user, right? But there's a lot of different ways bad guys can get into an organization. And subdomain takeover is one thing that our consultants use quite a bit for our customers to help them combat this. And what subdomain takeover is, so let's use Acme Company. I was a big Roadrunner fan in the day, and so Wile E. Coyote, that's where you would order everything. And so Acme Company has a domain. Their main domain is acme.com, and Wile E. Coyote, during a special sale, they registered explodingdarts.acme.com, and that's where they sold their exploding darts. And then after the sale was over, they kind of let that domain expire. They didn't pay for it anymore. And one of their sloppy IT people left the DNS records that point to explodingdarts.acme.com. And those records are out there, easy to scan, and that's kind of we've got tools that do this. They'll scan our customers' records and find any of these subdomains and make sure that they're legitimate. Because if they aren't legitimate, if they have been expired, then it's easy for a bad guy to take over to then start running and revive that subdomain. And now they've got lots of different ways to get the company data and customers of that company's data. So subdomain takeover is really a kind of a hot area that needs to be looked at in this time where perimeter security is more important than ever. So those are my main 4 stories.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. So what can we do about it?
Hey, yes, sorry, we jumped to the right slide here. I know this is kind of free form, but we tried to get some slides in. So I guess some of the things that we can do about it really depends on what you're using for remote access. I would say probably the vast majority of enterprises today are still using a traditional VPN concentrator or maybe VPN features on their firewall. And some of the things that we recommend right away to look at risk is on the corporate side, on the head end, the first and foremost, validate the code you're using doesn't have any known published vulnerabilities or CVEs. And not only for the head end concentrator, but for the version of code that perhaps some of the remote users are using. These published CVs are out there for us, and of course, then sort of the nefarious actors get them, so they know things that are exploitable. The last thing we want to happen is to have a vulnerability on your lifeline right now. The VPN concentrator is really your main connection to all your employees. Think of it like your core switch. You know, everybody's connected into this right now, and if you've got a known vulnerability that gets exploited, that could have been easily patched, you know, obviously that's a high risk, and we could potentially knock out all your users. And I don't think many enterprises have a plan B. What if that device goes down? What are we doing? Is it H8 or do I have a whole separate option? Of course, then we want to make sure we've got good logging, and hopefully it's going to a SIM or a syslog or something. Because there's such an influx of users right now, we don't want to overwrite perhaps a small little local log and lose any kind of audit trail that we might need in case something does happen. You know, there's with all these remote users right now, and maybe 20–30% of them have been using remote access over the last months and years, and they're familiar with it. A big chunk of the people that are working remote right now probably never have. You know, maybe purchasing is working remotely now, or they never did, or HR, or whatever department. So they may not be familiar. They might get phished. How would you even know what happened if you don't have good logging or something going to your SIM to correlate that activity? And then, of course, data, you know, data leakage protection. Not all files are meant to be off-site or to be in, you know, outside of your normal control boundaries. So we need to make sure that there's a good way to protect and stop that, or at least have visibility that it's happening, so you know that we have to make sure we understand how that file is being used at home. Somebody just take and download the entire employee benefits package or payroll or something to a spreadsheet on a home computer. You know, we need to make sure we can track that data, especially anything that's deemed as high value, high risk. Segmentation, same thing for remote access for VPN. A lot of people just spin up a tunnel and let the people come into the network, probably less restricted than they would be on the LAN. Maybe on your normal network, you've got engineering VLAN, you've got production VLAN, you've got accounting VLAN, you've got all these different VLANs, but when they come in VPN, that's gone. They're just coming in a pipe, and we have access to things that we normally might not have had. So how are you restricting those access controls, or can you even restrict those on your solution? It's probably a good question. We spoke a little bit about the redundancy and making sure that you've got a plan B, or at least have some option for resiliency should something happen to that box or hardware or config. Split tunneling use, again, this is another thing that maybe hasn't been talked about in preparation for something like this, because the people that were using VPN were likely users that had a laptop and are used to working remote. Well, with this huge rush and this influx that we are having, that perhaps maybe the home PCs are now coming on the network. And it's not much different than the BYOD devices you have maybe on the LAN, if your policy allows that. But again, you've got controls at the office for BYOD. Maybe they just go in the guest VLAN, or maybe they get Web Outlook or something like that. Well, I've got a BYOD device that's VPN into a tunnel with no segmentation or other controls. I've got a much higher risk now, especially if they're allowed to split tunnel right to the cloud, have connections to who knows what from their home device, and then I've got a VPN right into the office. Am I going to allow split tunneling or not? Or maybe split tunneling simply comes down to we don't have enough bandwidth on the head end to bring all that back, so we have to allow it. But what compensating controls should we be looking at that time? And then an easy, low-hanging fruit, easy win here is to go out to cissecurity.org. There are a ton of great config guides, hardening guides that you can download. They're free. They want you to use these. They're probably for, I would hate this, maybe 90% of all the different manufacturers' possible VPN. And run through that. Have somebody run through that checklist, at least for the high-risk ones, and make sure that your system is configured and hardened that way. again, you'd hate to lose your only lifeline to your employees because of a config somebody forgot a check mark. I mean, it's an easy thing to do. It's all there. It's free. And then, as Jeff mentioned earlier, take a look, run continuous pen tests or scans at the bare minimum of all your public address space right now. We're all holed up at home. We're working remote. So are all the nefarious actors. They have published lists of vulnerabilities just like you're looking at. So you can be sure that they're trying to exploit them while they're locked up at home, just like we are. So that's a little bit on the head end stuff, but hopefully there's some bits of information that are good for you there.
And Lisa, I'm glad you brought up the CIS guides. That might be a little bit to ask for every employee to go out and find that CIS guide, the hardening guide for their operating system, and do it on their own. So it might be a good time for the IT department to put together a quick summary of things that end users should be looking for at home. So the key points of the CIS guide, like you mentioned, kind of the high risk ones. The high risk ones for the end user would be useful for that new remote access group. Things like timeouts on the computers, because on their home computers, I'm guessing most people have turned off that automatic timeouts to lock the computer down. So they get up to go walk the dog, and their teenage son or daughter, they're on a break from homeschooling. They decide to sit down and use the home computer, which is now still connected to the VPN, and they're browsing to their questionable websites, clicking on questionable links while they're going through the VPN. So in essence, they're in company assets, and they could be downloading bad stuff within company areas. So that could be a way in for the bad guys that isn't really considered. We talked about data loss prevention, data leakage prevention. So our home computers and places where they're storing data, are they encrypted? That's an important concept of making sure that all data at rest is stored on encrypted devices. So that's another area that users can check on and make sure that they're using encrypted storage. And then simple things like license usage. With all these people remote access now, are there software licensing requirements that when you're online from home and you're in some software, are you using up a license? And should you tighten up the procedures of, hey, when you're not using the software, please log out because somebody else needs to jump in, and you're tying up a license when you're, like I said, out for your 20-minute dog walk, or you're doing Pilates for a little bit to release tension. So just different areas that we didn't have to consider before this.
So with all these risks, and obviously lots of remote users coming online right now, I mean, I guess when you look at companies adding massive amount of remote users, what should they be looking at?
Sure. I kind of look at two different areas here. You've got your general risks of any software as a service application, right? So a company puts up applications for their employees to do work remotely, and now they're kind of being flooded with, it was built for 20% of the employees, now it has to serve 90 to 100% of the employees. So have you scanned those applications that are now part of your software as a service offering? Have you scanned those applications for any risks? Are they able to handle the additional traffic? Multi-factor is a big thing, right? You hear multi-factor authentication. That's a necessity now. Password and username and password. There's so many databases of exposed usernames and passwords out there that gives a real strong foothold to try to guess someone's password. And now you've got the entire world is opened up to remote access. So pretty much all those users, those credentials are in use on applications that are up in the cloud. So anybody can try a username and password. So multi-factor is becoming a certain must-have. And then I talked a little bit about the licensing issue. Well, a lot of ways companies are getting around this licensing issue is sharing credentials or having general use credentials so that 10 people know the admin credential for a software, some software as a service thing, so that they can get in and manage users. Well, sharing those credentials is never a good idea. So we always recommend, hey, you've got to have named users have their own accounts and try to control those admin users as only those people that need it, and those people that need it should have separate accounts for like their day-to-day use of an application, and then a different login for that administrative use. So those are some good controls you can put in place over software as a service in general. But then looking at a specific tool, something like Microsoft 365. It used to be Office 365. I don't know if everybody saw the memo, but they're dropping Office and they're making it Microsoft 365. And that's because, Office 365 was primarily just mail and Word and Excel. Well, now Microsoft 365 encompasses all sorts of collaboration tools and different utilities that interact together. Well, as this is all becoming online and serving what used to be what the VPN did, we really have to crack down and take a look at our security settings in Microsoft 365. Is MFA used not just for your initial login, but is it required for all those applications that are connected to it? Think of the SharePoint sites, making sure MFA is needed to get access to those different SharePoint sites. The DLP features, the data loss prevention features, and the mobile device management features of Office 365, are they enabled? Are they correctly identifying new devices that are connecting to the Microsoft 365 environment? There is a default setting when you first turn on the mobile device management features that if a policy can't be applied to a device, by default, it trusts the new devices. So that's a whole area of you're taking a new device, I can't quite apply a policy, so just to make things work so that our users can connect, we'll allow it to connect. Well, it's kind of a bad idea because now I'm sure you can introduce a whole lot of insecure devices to that trusted area. So just making sure that those new tools and features are configured correctly, I think those are the main things we can do right now.
Some of the other things, just to expand on that, Jeff, is so instead of 100% cloud, and we really don't know about a lot of customers that really truly are 100% cloud SaaS apps or Microsoft 365. That's going to take me a while to quit saying Office 365. But
I'm with you. I'm right there.
There's a silver lining, I guess, if we can say, to this whole thing right now with this work from home that we've all been forced into having to adapt and secure it and make sure it's productive and things like that. But what a way to test our business continuity plan or our DR plan. We could have never envisioned having a test to the scope, to stress test our plans, our environment, our designs, policies, procedures, all of it. So, first thing I guess what I'd do is take note of what's working and what's not. But as you're looking at your remote access and you're deciding what can we do, we didn't survive the mass influx of users. First and foremost, I wanted to say that there are a lot of vendors that are stepping up right now and stepping up in a big way. They're spinning up free remote access. They're allowing you to burst licenses for some of the vendors you may already own. They're adding that option B. So if something does happen to your primary VPN, you could actually have a spun up option B ready and waiting. And they're doing this all at no cost. It's just amazing to me to see these vendors and everybody stepping up and helping us all survive this and work well together. So that's probably the first thing I want to say about it. But when we go through and we assess what worked and what didn't, and did this remote access give me the controls or performance or security I needed, there's a lot of new things out there. And so, it kind of first depends on, are you a cloud first sort of organization right now? If your intent is to be cloud first, then my guess is you're probably going to be wanting to look at a remote access system that's cloud-based. And if the data they're reaching and the apps they want and everything is already there, it would make sense to put that in versus backhauling or tromboning or hairpinning, whatever you want to call it, but to bring that traffic in with a VPN just to send it back out to the cloud when I can be much more efficient, probably get better performance, and put that in a cloud-based system. So initially, some of the cloud-based systems were concentrators in the cloud sold as software as a service. It wasn't really built to scale and to be what true cloud-based remote access would be. Some manufacturers are leading the charge in that space. Absolutely. One of the technologies, and it's somewhat new. It's been around, but it just hasn't had the traction yet, is called SaaS-E. And really what that is secure access edge technology, meaning my remote access is in the cloud. Not only does it terminate and encrypt a VPN tunnel, but it provides additional features like SD-WAN. SD-WAN is really important if I'm going to be running my voice or anything else that needs a good quality of service through that tunnel as well. And or build out extensions to your home office and have that extension be bridged from my internal voice system. And then I add the security features on, like the DLP and things that we were just talking about. If there's a lot of SaaS apps, really need to know what data is going where, who's using it, and if I ever have to pull that back, if the employee left, to know where that is and to have control of that account. So to have that CASB built in, to have firewalls and advanced threat protection, malware, all of those obvious pieces in a cloud-based solution. And some that come to mind with that right out of the gate would be something like a Palo Alto. They've got Prisma Access, kind of rebranded Global Protect Cloud, but they've really added a lot of functionality. So if you're a cloud-first organization, that might be a good place to start looking. As far as on-prem, so maybe you're not a cloud-first company. On-prem, there are still a ton of different hardware vendors that support that model, absolutely, with the same kind of DLP and firewall and things like that. So, some of the ones that come first to mind there is Pulse Secure. For those that have been in this industry as long as I have, Pulse Secure started out as Neoterras, who was really the first SSL VPN manufacturer around. So the longevity is there. It's purpose-built. What's nice about it is you can get very granular. So let's just go back to that HR person or that purchasing person. Maybe they need one app at the head end, or one file, or one directory at the head end. It's very easy with something like a Pulse Secure to control those access rates down to a specific application, port, protocol, file. Much easier than it is to do with a generic IPsec tunnel. So, to have those types of controls, a Pulse Secure has things like that built in. As far as extreme networks, again, you can get very granular, F5. There's a lot of vendors that if you're still looking at replacing or scaling up your remote access when this is all said and done, or start on your plan B now, that you might want to consider. And I know, Jeff, there's probably some good best of breed stuff around also for the SaaS and for the remote users as well.
Yeah, definitely. Let's consider we talked about security awareness training, and a company called KnowBe4. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of them. They've been big in the phishing test arena for a long time. It's a company that you can set up campaigns to periodically send phishes to your employees and see how many people are clicking on bad links, and if they click on links, how many people are entering company credentials or different things into forums, online forums. And then it modified it. It grew, the platform grew to delivering training on top of that. So you click on a bad link, you clicked on this link here, you definitely need this training again, even though you had some front end training. So security awareness training through KnowBe4 has been a developing area and a very strong area of their product. Well, they've jumped up and they've developed a couple new training modules specifically around remote access, remote work. So that's one company that's really responding. You look at Microsoft 365 and how they are really rapidly evolving their product to not just email access, but again, all the collaboration tools that they offer. Microsoft Teams for doing meetings and video chats and sharing screens and all sorts of tools that are now built into Microsoft 365, including the development of the mobile device management features. So you can, you can let the right devices connect, and if devices don't have certain security controls, it'll automatically upload those controls if you configure it that way, or it'll put the device into kind of a quarantine area where they can only see certain things. they wouldn't be able to download emails to a phone that's not made through all the checks. You can only view an email, because if you download an email to a phone, that gets stored on that phone, and who knows what happens to that file then. So Microsoft 365 is stepping up too. And then in the home office arena, I don't have any specific vendors, but things that kind of you need to check. A lot of vendors play in these different spots, but wherever you are, check on your the amount of bandwidth that you have at home, right? So a lot of companies are stepping up with the bandwidth that they're offering, maybe having specials on in doubling your bandwidth for the next couple of months. I've seen some specials, some emails come across from Spectrum, is the company that I use, but different bandwidth. So there's more bandwidth needed at home, definitely now. We've got homeschooling going on, right? So you got the kids are watching videos. I'm here trying to do a video conference, so I'm using up bandwidth. My wife is streaming exercise videos, so all that stuff, that's bandwidth. And so I want to make sure that we're getting the bandwidth that we need. And then, your home router, there's a lot of places that sell good routers, Wi-Fi routers. It might be time to upgrade that router, because if you have a router that's 8-9 years old, odds are it's not able to distribute the higher speed traffic that you're able to get in the house. It's not able to distribute it to all the people that need it at the same time. The newer routers can with more antennas. So that might be another area that you need to look in. So those are kind of the areas where companies are jumping up and offering better things to help the remote access go faster.
And even with the home office setup stuff, Jeff, anybody needs to make sure that they're not, with these home routers, not using default usernames and passwords. I mean, that's the last thing you need, is somebody easily getting on a home router, which is, again, tunneling up to your enterprise network. And so we always ask that I know it might take some doing, but to work with your help desk team to validate some simple things to make sure that they've got secure Wi-Fi, that they at least have a password on it, that it's not open Wi-Fi for a neighbor to get on, again, to come up that VPN tunnel. And then one of the things that we talked about briefly, but just to reiterate on the home network side, is to increase or make the idle timeouts shorter, and even periodically force re-auth. If somebody nails up a VPN and it's allowed to sit up and do nothing, again, for anybody to walk by and to hop on from the family, or make vulnerable to anybody, really. And not only that, but to help relieve some of those license counts. If you've got a long timeout or long session timer, or you're literally waiting for somebody to log off, you might be eating up multiple licenses that right now are in high demand. So if we shorten that idle timeout or that re-auth to make sure they're really still working, that we can free up a license and make sure that we're securing that link for just not any drive-by person to walk by in the home office to come by. So there's a lot of stuff on the home office side. Again, vendors are really stepping up and offering some free advanced endpoint protection. SentinelOne, CrowdStrike, and others are really saying, here's some free licenses for your home users, because we know there's probably a bunch of personal owned devices, the PCs that are connecting to your corporate network and corporate data center. Here's a little added protection, and they're giving 30, 60, 90 days. We have a list of those out on our website right now of all the vendors stepping up from the VPN side and from the endpoint protection side that can maybe help you make sure that we're not introducing risks that we can avoid by just utilizing some of these free tools.
Okay, yeah. So we got a couple questions coming in, but before I get to them, I want to make sure we got an opportunity to talk a little bit about Synercomm, because I appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to do this with me. So can you talk to me a little bit about the services that you guys have that can help on all of these topics we've talked about today?
Sure, absolutely. See on the screen, we got a slide that talks about a couple of assessments that we've spun up as a result of this greater demand on remote access needs. And the first one is the remote mini assessment. It talks about what are the immediate risks at work from home, looking at it from the corporate side. Again, a lot of things we talked about, are security patches in place? Is multi-factor in place? Do we have enough bandwidth to meet the needs of all the employees? Is VPN client software in place? So you look at the VPN process, right? And there's a process, there's a part of it that's at the corporate center, and then there's a part of it that has to be at the endpoint, at the user house. So whether that be hardware or software based, are the right VPN settings in place to make sure that those connections are secure. It's typically a 2 to 3 day engagement. Also, we've spun up a similar engagement for assessing the Office 365, Microsoft 365 environment. Again, we're looking at and leveraging the CIS guidance, the CIS controls, to say how should it be hardened. Microsoft has its own tool. It's called Secure Score, and it does look at some of these settings, but our assessment gets much deeper into those settings than the Microsoft Secure Score does. And we're not quite as biased as Microsoft might be at scoring its own tool. So we've got a blog up on why Secure Score isn't as good as an assessment on your own. So that's just our thoughts. As it's a quick 2 to 3 day look at your settings on Office Microsoft 365 and all the different things that work within Microsoft 365. And then continuous pen test. We've been developing this. This isn't just for now, but this is instead of having your one-time, once-a-year pen test look at everything. What about doing something as the entire year goes on? The continuous pen test idea is analyzing and having scans run continuously throughout the year. And when something new comes up, that it's automatically scanned, and then our professionals take a look at, well, maybe it's a new application that's being developed and is being put up into the cloud. So we're assessing that application as it's being developed and as it's being put up into the cloud. So it's a continuous process. It isn't just a one-time look at your security in your environment. And then just one quick one to touch on what Lisa had talked about with this is a live test of everybody's business continuity plan. We're starting to incorporate that into all of our upcoming engagements is an assessment as to how did things go, what worked, what didn't work. We'll start to help you get a list together of, hey, this stuff really didn't work very well and we need a new solution, or this stuff worked really well, maybe we use this tool instead of that tool. So that's kind of how we're adapting and modifying what we do.
Okay. So Jeff, you mentioned your blog, and that was very helpful in me reading part of your blog to prepare for today's meeting. Lisa, maybe can you address a little bit about some of the things you talk about on your blog, as well as just tell me a little bit about Synercomm as a whole?
Absolutely. Yes, our website's been getting hit a lot with this, and I'm glad to see it because Synercomm has been in business in networking and security for about 30 years, and we focus on mid to large enterprise. And what's unique about us is we have really what I would consider best of breed audit and assessment team that does these types of mini assessments that spun this up out of necessity because we had so many customers that they were agile enough to develop these mini assessments to get another set of eyes or full-blown program assessments. These guys are best of breed, and if they weren't white hatters, they would probably scare me because I've seen them get into stuff that just amazes me. And then we also have best of breed pro services, and our pro services team does everything from project management to implementation. These are certified, experienced engineers that are Synercomm staff. A lot of companies just have bench that they call on when they want. These are Synercomm employees that are absolutely dedicated. We can do architectural designs and make sure that we're building stuff to your compliance needs. We really focus a lot with all of our customers to make sure that whatever they're designing or working on, that it's part of a greater picture, a security framework where we have not only the tool, but it's configured for what you need. It's maturing your entire security program. It's just not a splot on the wall and you're hoping to fit a need. So we really like to take the time and understand your business needs and to really make sure that what you're putting together fits a solid security framework and roadmap, and whether it's NIST or CIS or there's just a ton of them, and that we're working with you through that and navigating that roadmap. And as far as the blog, one of the things that I think is very unique about Synercomm is we really like to educate our customers. We have done, if you go out to our blogs, there's how-tos on so many different things. whether it's the Office 365 or remote access we're talking about today, but about known issues, what using things like WMI probing or things that you might be pulling Windows passwords and the vulnerabilities, or lessons learned in pen testing for the last 15 years. So there's a lot of good information out there, and we like to share that. Again, we like to share and educate our customers however we can. And then things like our webinar series, one that we've done is that CIS Top 20 Road framework, the how-to. Every other week, we took one of the tenants, framework, control one, did a whole hour on it, and not only what was required, but we also give a list of tools, both free or enterprise for tools, to help you in maturing that road, that framework and maturing your security processes. So that whole webinar series is recorded. It's there to download, or simply if you want to download the PDF of the slides just to review them and get a few free pointers. And then just other events like this, where we just like to take the time to reach out and say, yes, you're not alone. We've been working with a lot of customers that probably have very similar issues and questions that you have, and we're here to help and happy to help any way we can.
Okay, great. Well, we got 3 questions, and I'm trying to be conscious of the time here, so I'll ask this one to Jeff. What are the kind of the basics, must-dos for remote access?
Sure. I'll give 5 real basic main ones that we like to see. Number 1, require a VPN. That's for access to any of the internal assets of the organization. Number 2, encryption. Encryption on both ends of the VPN tunnel, both encryption on where you're storing data, so that data is encrypted when it's stored at rest and in transit. Multi-factor authentication is number 3. There's no argument or wiggle room there. MFA is a must. Endpoint protection for your devices, including the bring your own devices. Right, if you're supplying your own home computer, you should be meeting the endpoint protection requirements of your organization. So if that's Symantec or McAfee or whoever it is, make sure that the endpoint controls are on the devices. And if you do use your own devices, we like to see virtual desktop technologies used. So you're not running your own desktop and operating things. You're running a desktop that's hosted back at the data center. So the only thing you're seeing is a screenshot. The only thing that's going over the wire is the screenshot and keyboard commands. Everything else is actually running in the virtual environment back at the data center. So those are our 5 must-dos.
Okay. I've got a couple more questions coming in, so let's move through these quickly. We have another question. You mentioned to prevent remote users from storing company data on remote devices. How do you enforce that?
I can take that one if you don't mind, Chris. I guess the first thing I would say there is DLP. There's many tools, specifically where we're looking at probably as a client-based DLP. Now, to get back to the Microsoft 365 part, which I'm sure a majority of folks are using, Microsoft does have some basic DLP controls. They have the ability to, if you go under the security and compliance section under the admin console, there's a lot of things you can do as far as limiting access to applications and features and stuff like that. But they also have what they call FCI, which is file classification, I think is the terminology. Anyway, the file classification, or tagging as most of us know it, allows you to tag files that would be, we mentioned earlier, that would be high risk, that are for, certain eyes only. And then you got your medium risk and your low, which is public. So anyway, you can go through and classify those files. And not only that, with Microsoft, you can actually go and do an e-discovery looking for where those tagged files are. So that should be part of hopefully more of an overall configuration for all of your Office 365 environment, but definitely most particular into this remote access time, to make sure that maybe you've got a policy that my high critical files do not leave. And the only way to look at them would be through like a BDI or something like that. And then beyond the Microsoft 365, there's specific players in this game, manufacturers. Some that come to mind would be Digital Guardian, Force Scouts, Symantec is a couple. that would be an agent that you can put on there. And you might want to start with your C-level or somebody that would have access to critical files just through the Windows rights. Well, let's layer on this extra client DLP for them to make sure that if I am in HR and I have access to payroll, or I'm purchasing and have access to these banking things, that I don't open them, save them, rename them, print them, take a screenshot. A lot of these DLP agents have that granular of control to know that Lisa opened an Excel spreadsheet. She saved it as vacationpictures.jpg, emailed it to her webmail account. A good DLP agent would have caught all of that and stopped it at any point. So if you've got files like that you are critical to your business, you might want to investigate using something like one of those focused DLP agents to help reduce that risk.
Okay. A couple more questions here. I guess someone's asking a question. I guess they're poking around your website. What is adversary simulation?
Want me to jump in on that, Lisa?
Sure,
AdSim, sure. Yep. AdSim is just quickly, we act as that adversary. We are on your network working directly with your response team or your internal IT team, and we're running those same hacks, cracks that the bad guys are doing. And we're working with your team to see, is it, what's being logged? What are the indications of what we're doing? And can you respond to it? Would you be able to shut me down? Would you be able to react to me trying to get control of a machine, then pivot to another machine, and ultimately trying to get to the critical IT assets? So that's us hand in hand. You directly learning from what the bad actors are doing and tuning your systems so that you can see what's going on and detect what's going on.
I've seen one of these in action, Chris, and it is pretty amazing. Our pen testers are going to go in there and try to attack maybe a server in your DMZ. And they're sitting right there with you while you're looking at your console on your firewall. Did my firewall even see that? Why wasn't that logged? Why wasn't it blocked? I should have gotten an alert. Okay, now we got that far. Now let's go, and as it's traversing through, we're checking every control along the way to make sure that you're configured correctly. So it's either blocking it and logging it. Did it get to the SIM to create an alert? Why not? Let's get all those tuned. So we select different controls. Maybe it's an endpoint. Maybe we're trying to exploit an endpoint that's on the LAN with a known vulnerability. Why didn't the firewall drop that with vulnerability protection? Why wasn't that logged? Why didn't the endpoint agent catch that? Why wasn't that logged? So as we're sitting there with you while it's happening, you're checking all the controls, and we stop right there and we work through tuning it and then try it again so that we know that it's right. So, and not only that, it's a great training opportunity for the person or the team that's sitting there with our pen testers, because they're telling and explaining why that worked. How did this get through? This is what happened. That was encrypted. You needed to decrypt here. As you can see, there's just a ton of things that are tested right then and there, so you know that it's configured correctly.
All right, two more questions. This one I'm personally interested in is: do you have any suggestions for smart home devices around the home workplace?
Oh, so
First, Lisa, I have comments too. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I was just going to say there's some free scanners that are out there. Rapid7 and others have free scanners that are on that can scan your network for smart devices, and better yet, tell you which ones are using the default username and password, which is the scary part. So that's something that you can do. But my suggestion, well, I'll let Jeff go. It's probably more to do with segmentation and making sure that
was the first place I was going to go, right? Have a separate network for those devices, because then they're not going to get at your information stores and your computers. So segment your network, set up a different network just for those smart devices wherever possible. But number two, do your research on them, right? Look at the reviews, because a lot of times you'll see in the reviews, hey, somebody that did a lot of research on it found it was sending all of my pictures off to South Korea, North Korea, somewhere that's the Ring doorbell was sending the entire video stream somewhere that shouldn't go. Number two, when you get those devices, make sure you do firmware updates, because a lot of times out of the box, they're going to have old firmware, and the old firmware is where a lot of the exploits will be. So if you're going to use them, update them right away when you get them. As Lisa said, make sure default passwords are changed, and so that you're securing those devices when you do it. But segment the network that's my best one.
Okay. So last question here, and then we will end this for the day. What do you suggest for targeted email attacks?
Do you want me to go, Jeff, or?
Yes, go ahead. I can chime in too, but go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, well, it's, and they're on the uptake right now. It's like crazy. They know that there's remote users at home that normally aren't working behind their typical corporate environment and controls. They know that there's users that are split tunneled and going directly to Office 365 or whatever other mail that they're using, Gmail, etc. So they know that everybody's working in a ad hoc, unfamiliar, uncontrolled environment. So the targeted phishing attacks are definitely on the uprise. And really, first and foremost, my recommendation is to talk and communicate with all your employees right now to let them know that these are on the uptake. I was just doing a email security check on a customer yesterday, and it's amazing to me the I want to say simplicity that people fall for. Click here for a free mask. Click here to so you can get your remote access set up at your corporate office. We need you to update your username and password to a different, stronger password. Enter it here. And people are doing this. So education is where I'm going to stand on that one. There are some technical controls, obviously, and I think, Jeff, I'll let you go down that path, but let your employees know that you're primed for it. You're scared and nervous at home. You're doing things in a different environment. You don't have your controls there. There's a lot of things that are building to a perfect storm on why somebody can be phished or targeted in these email attacks, and it's happening. You could look at the posts daily on what's going around. It's sad.
Yeah, on the technical side, Microsoft 365 offers a lot of safe link protection where it'll scan links and make sure that they're safe. Tools that you can use. So you get an email and you're not sure if this link is legitimate or it's right. VirusTotal is a website that you can go to, and you can copy the URL into VirusTotal and submit it, and it'll give you whether it thinks it's a safe link or not. You can also submit files that way too. Education is the main thing, as Lisa said. You can't. I'll go more to the targeted towards the CFO type fraud things or the CEO type fraud things. You can't just poke your head into the CFO's office and say, hey, did you just request all the W-2 information to be sent to this address because you're on a plane and it needs to be done within the next half hour? So you can't just go ask, but you've got to have those lines of communication open. So, know the right phone numbers to call when you need to prove that a request is legitimate. Am I supposed to be wiring this $30,000 to a construction vendor who's building something for us when that address just changed? The last payment I made was to a different address. Why did this change? Make sure that everybody knows the procedures on a big amount of money is going wired somehow. If there's an address change, you have to go verify it this way. Just make sure that those procedures are in place and that they're being followed.
Yeah, we've all heard of the gift card request, right? The boss calls, we need 5 gift cards for, we're donating to Make-A-Wish Foundation or something, and they, send me the codes as soon as you get them. And you send an email to your boss, and they're like, what gift cards? It's sad. It's just these simple things that seem to get through. So education is the key there. You can only put so many controls in place for the email because otherwise it would block everything. Some of these aren't even rated as spam senders. They spin up these email servers and they spray out their attack and then they're gone. So they don't even make a database. So it's that sandboxing of a URL. It's looking for attachments, all the things that perhaps your mail gateway or your next-gen firewall can offer you.
Okay. That is all the questions. I appreciate both your times today. This has been an absolute pleasure. We will have this recorded and we will send it out to anybody who might not have been able to attend, as well as you can forward it on to the other people attending today. So I appreciate everyone's time. Have a great day. Stay safe and stay inside. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks, everyone.